Richard's voice carried across the conference room, proud and deliberate. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my niece, Claire Whitmore, fresh from Stanford. She'll be joining us as our newest project lead." I forced a smile as polite applause filled the room. Claire stepped forward, all youthful confidence and polished charm, the kind that makes people lean in before she even speaks. She looked like the future Richard wanted to parade, bright, connected, untouchable. I'd seen plenty of new hires in my 15 years here, but none came with a family badge clipped invisibly to their blazer. Richard didn't need to say it. Claire wasn't here to climb the ladder. She was already standing at the top rung. Then his eyes found mine. "Anna, I'm assigning Claire to the antivirus project. She'll work directly under your supervision. I want you to guide her. Make sure this becomes a flagship success." I nodded, but inside, my stomach tightened. The antivirus project had been on my desk for months, my team grinding long nights to shape it into something market-ready. And now, just as we were nearing critical phases, the boss's niece would be my apprentice. Every glitch, every delay, every misstep, those would be on me. Not her. Never her. Claire turned toward me, hand extended, smile perfectly rehearsed. "I'm excited to learn from you. I've heard you're the one who makes everything run." Her words should have felt flattering, but they landed like a warning. A single compliment wrapped around a reminder I was the one expected to hold the safety net. Back at my desk later, Devin poked his head in. "So, we've got a new prodigy." "Huh." His tone carried both humor and concern. "Something like that," I muttered. "Richard wants her on the antivirus, which means I'm suddenly responsible for proving blood is thicker than logic." Devin frowned. "You'll carry us through. You always do." I wanted to believe him. But I knew the weight of this assignment wasn't just about code or clients. It was about family ties, unspoken rules, and the cost of being the outsider when the circle closed. As Claire unpacked her things, a few desks away, chattering brightly with others, I caught Richard watching her with pride from his office window. My chest tightened with the realization I wasn't just supervising a project anymore. I was supervising the boss's golden niece, and whatever happened next would define us both. And already, I could sense the storm quietly forming. The first week with Claire on my team was a test of patience I hadn't signed up for. She came in every morning brimming with enthusiasm, dropping phrases like industry disruption and scalable innovation, as if reciting from a startup pitch deck. My instinct told me this wasn't earned wisdom, just academic gloss. I assigned her a series of tasks, documentation, client requirement mapping, some code review, nothing impossible, but detailed enough to measure her discipline. Within hours, she was at my desk, insisting the approach was outdated, that her Stanford professor had suggested a faster methodology. "Claire," I said evenly, "this company doesn't run on theory. Clients want stable, tested systems. There's no shortcut for that." Her eyes flashed with the kind of confidence only someone new to failure can afford. Then maybe that's why the market is leaving us behind. For a moment, I bit my tongue, feeling every pair of ears in the open office straining to hear. I dismissed her with a quiet, "We'll see." But inside, I was simmering. Nepotism or not, she was threatening to unravel order with raw arrogance. Yet the following days forced me to see something else. During a design review, she pointed out a blind spot in our user interface, something I had overlooked in the grind of deadlines. And when she walked me through her proposed fix, the simplicity was impressive. I adjusted my tone. "That could work. Let's test it." Her smile was genuine this time, not rehearsed. Slowly. The dynamic shifted, her energy pressed us forward. My caution steadied her. Where she leapt, I anchored. Where I hesitated. She pushed. The clashes didn't vanish, but something resembling respect began to grow. By the end of the second week, we were working side by side without sparks turning into flames. Devin even commented quietly, "Didn't think you two would last this long. Looks like you might actually balance each other out." I allowed myself a small nod, though I knew better than to relax completely. In an environment like ours, harmony never lasted long. And somewhere behind the glass walls, resentment was already watching, waiting to strike. Working with Claire had turned into something almost steady. We still butted heads, but the tension began to serve the project rather than stall it. Clients noticed the progress. Devin even joked that the antivirus was finally shaping up into a product worth bragging about. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to exhale. But peace has a way of unsettling those who thrive in shadows. Elaine had always been cordial to me, sharp smiles and clipped compliments, but never warmth. She managed Richard's schedule like a gatekeeper to royalty, and she didn't like anyone standing too close to the throne. With Claire back, she should have felt secure. Instead, my growing bond with Richard's niece made her restless. I caught the whispers, first comments that floated back from meetings I wasn't in. Anna's been difficult lately. Maybe jealous of Claire. I ignored them, chalked it up to office politics. But when Richard's tone toward me cooled, when he began second-guessing decisions he once trusted me with, I knew the poison had found its mark. I didn't hear Elaine speak the words, but Devin overheard one conversation in the hallway. A single mother like Anna can't balance long-term responsibility, she told Richard, her voice low and measured. You need someone you can rely on, someone without distractions. When he told me later, my chest tightened. It wasn't just about me. It was about my son. My life outside the office being twisted into a weapon against me. Still, I focused on the work. Claire and I pushed the beta closer to completion, running late-night tests, smoothing flaws. On the surface, momentum carried us forward. But beneath, I felt Elaine's eyes, sharp and calculating. Every time I passed her desk, the closer we drew to success, the more certain I became someone wasn't preparing for celebration. They were preparing for sabotage, and their strike would come when the spotlight was brightest. Weeks of long nights and tense revisions finally paid off when the antivirus beta ran flawlessly in our internal demo. Devin stood at the back of the room, arms crossed but smiling, while Claire presented the interface changes she had pushed for. To my surprise, she delivered with clarity and poise, her confidence grounded now not just in theory, but in real results. When the system flagged and neutralized a simulated breach in under a second, applause broke out across the room. For once, the noise wasn't forced. I glanced at Claire, and for the first time, I saw genuine respect in her eyes. You were right, she said quietly afterward, walking beside me down the corridor. I thought I had all the answers, but you've been teaching me what it really means to build something that lasts. The words caught me off guard. I'd grown used to defending myself, to bracing for skepticism or dismissal. Hearing her admit she valued my guidance stirred something unexpected pride, cautious but real. Richard called me into his office that evening. He sat with his hands folded, expression measured. The clients are impressed, he admitted. If this holds through the next round, we'll have contracts worth millions. I'm authorizing a public launch. His tone carried both hope and hesitation, as if he was granting me a chance to redeem myself from doubts he hadn't voiced outright. I left his office with mixed relief and unease. The team threw themselves into final preparations. Devin worked around the clock. Claire shadowed me on every decision, eager to learn more. The office felt alive again, buzzing with possibility. But beneath the excitement, I couldn't shake the awareness that success attracts envy, like light draws moths. Every late night I spent testing, every quiet glance I caught from Elaine across the floor, reminded me that shadows move most dangerously just before the spotlight hits. And now, with the launch days away, the spotlight was blinding. The ballroom buzzed with anticipation. Rows of investors, journalists, and clients filled the seats, cameras already pointed at the stage. Claire stood beside me, her hands tight around the presentation remote. I gave her a reassuring nod before stepping forward. "Today," I began, my voice carrying across the room, "we unveil a product built not only to protect, but to outsmart every threat that hides in the digital shadows." Applause followed, polite but expectant. I inserted the demo USB into the laptop, breathing through the weight of the moment. Claire clicked to begin the sequence, and for the first few seconds, everything looked normal. The interface loaded. The dashboard blinked alive. Then the system froze. A hollow pause filled the room. Claire tapped the keys again. Nothing. The screen flashed an error, then another. The entire demo collapsed into a stream of failure codes. I felt the blood drain from my face. Devin's eyes widened in the audience, helpless from where he stood. Murmurs spread like fire through the crowd. Reporters leaned forward, phones out, capturing every second. I tried to salvage it, speaking over the chaos. This is precisely why we test against failure scenarios. But the words sounded thin, brittle. The investors weren't listening. They were watching the crash loop on the giant screen behind me. Richard rose from his table, smile frozen in place for the cameras. "Technical hiccups," he told the audience smoothly, ushering the event to a close. Nothing more than growing pains. His calm tone barely masked the storm in his eyes. Backstage, once the doors closed and the audience dispersed, the storm broke. "Anna!" Richard snapped, voice low but laced with fury. "Months of preparation, and you let this happen." In front of everyone, Claire opened her mouth, then closed it, her silence louder than any defense. I stood there, throat tight, humiliation searing deeper than his words. I had led the project. The failure, staged or not, now had my name on it. And as Richard turned away, I knew the price of this public humiliation was about to fall squarely on me. Richard called me into his office the next morning. The blinds were drawn, the air heavy with the weight of unspoken judgment. Elaine stood discreetly to the side, hands folded as if she were simply part of the furniture, but I could feel her presence like a dagger pressed between my shoulder blades. Richard didn't waste time. "Anna, yesterday's disaster was unacceptable. Clients are already calling. The board is questioning our leadership. And you," he paused, his jaw tightening, "you were responsible for oversight." I kept my voice steady. "Richard, we tested every build. Something was tampered with. That crash wasn't part of the software we signed off on." Elaine leaned in, her tone soft but cutting. Or perhaps the stress of balancing work and personal responsibilities is catching up. Maybe it's too much for one person to manage. My chest burned, but I refused to let her see me flinch. I turned to Richard. "You know my record. 15 years. Not one failure on launch day. Doesn't that count for something?" Richard's eyes shifted, but not toward me. They flickered to Claire, who had been called in to sit across the table. She looked down, fingers twisting in her lap, unable to meet my gaze. Her silence said everything: fear, loyalty, or both, but not courage. Something in me broke then, not in anger, but in resignation. I opened my briefcase, pulled out the envelope I had prepared that morning, and placed it gently on Richard's desk. My resignation, I said quietly, effective immediately. The room was still. Richard's expression was unreadable. Claire's eyes welled with something like regret, and Elaine, her lips curved into the faintest smile, as though she had won a private war no one else even knew was being fought. I walked out without looking back. My footsteps echoed down the corridor I had walked for over a decade, each one pulling me further from the life I had built here. But I knew what Elaine didn't. Removing the backbone doesn't steady the body. It collapses it. And the collapse was already on its way. It didn't take long after I left for the cracks to widen. From a distance, I watched the headlines roll in like waves battering a fragile ship. Nepotism at Collins Software. Failed launch exposes leadership. Rift. The story wasn't just about the product anymore. It was about Richard, his choices, and his niece. Deadlines slipped almost immediately. Without me there to hold the pieces together, the team faltered. Claire tried. I could tell working late, sending desperate emails, even reaching out to a few clients herself, but she wasn't ready. The balance between vision and execution is fragile, and no amount of charm or theory could replace years of experience. Clients who had been eager to sign contracts grew restless, then angry. Devin told me later that one called their office a circus and hung up before negotiations even began. The media picked up every whisper, spinning it into a storm of scrutiny. Inside the company, the pressure spread like fire. Richard stormed through meetings, snapping at employees who were already stretched thin. His once commanding presence now looked brittle, desperate. And people notice when a leader starts breaking. Resignations followed. First a handful of junior developers, then a senior account manager, and finally 2 of the lead engineers. Each departure widened the gap until there was no chance of catching up to the schedule. The board stepped in, their voices cold with calculation. If this continues, Richard will be looking at losses in the millions. Investors are nervous. Shareholders are furious. He tried to defend himself, but even his old allies had turned wary. Elaine, once so smug in her victory, was now avoiding eye contact in boardrooms. She had gambled everything on removing me, and the collapse was dragging her down with the rest of them. From the outside, I should have felt vindicated, maybe even triumphant. But instead, I felt a quiet heaviness. Years of building, undone in weeks. And yet, deep down, I knew something else. The truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how carefully it was buried. It was Devin who finally reached out to me, his voice low over the phone. "Anna, something's not right." I've been digging through the system logs. I listened in silence as he explained. On the morning of the launch, a foreign USB had been inserted into the demo laptop. The logs showed it clearly an access point just hours before we went on stage. Whoever had done it left a digital fingerprint behind. Devin didn't stop there. He pulled security footage from the office, cross-referencing the timeline. And there she was, Elaine, slipping into the demo room while most of us were in final rehearsal. She moved quickly, too quickly for someone who belonged there. But the real blow came when Devin uncovered fragments of deleted emails. They weren't just erased, they'd been deliberately scrubbed from the system. Still, remnants clung to the archives like shadows, enough to reveal her intentions, swapping the file, planting the crash. The pieces aligned with cruel precision. "Anna," he said quietly, "you didn't fail. You were set up." The words hit me like both a relief and a wound. I had known, in my gut, that the crash hadn't been mine. But hearing the proof that someone had deliberately destroyed my work to end me stirred something colder than anger. Claire, he told me, had started to suspect it too. She had noticed Elaine's unease, the way her stories shifted when asked simple questions. But suspicion was one thing, evidence was another. And now, Devon had both. Richard needs to see this, I said, though the thought twisted in my chest. He had turned on me so quickly, believed whispers over years of loyalty. Would he even listen? Devon's voice was steady. He won't have a choice. The board won't let this slide once they see the evidence, and with that, the tide that had buried me so deeply began to turn. The truth was no longer a hope, it was a weapon, waiting to be revealed. Devon called me the next morning. It's happening. Claire and I are going to Richard with the evidence. I stayed silent, torn between hope and bitterness. For so long, I had carried the weight of failure on my shoulders while whispers tore at my name. Now the truth was finally ready to surface. Later, Devon recounted the meeting. He and Claire entered Richard's office, folders in hand, faces set with quiet resolve. Devon laid the system logs on the desk, first timestamps, access records, irrefutable proof of the foreign USB. Then came the security footage, Elaine slipping into the demo room. Finally, the partial emails, fragments spelling out deliberate tampering. Richard tried to brush it aside at first. Anyone could have. But his voice faltered as the evidence stacked higher. Undeniable. Then Claire spoke. Uncle, Anna didn't fail. She saved this project. She mentored me when I was arrogant, taught me what real leadership looks like. The truth is, I froze when you blamed her, and I regret it every day. Her words broke through the last layer of resistance. Richard leaned back, his face pale, as if the foundation he had trusted crumbled beneath him. Elaine, cornered, tried to deny it all. Those files are doctored. This is a setup. Her voice cracked, brittle against the silence of the room, but the board members, already summoned to review the situation, were unmoved. They pressed Richard hard, reminding him of shareholder confidence, of the company's collapsing reputation. At last, with the weight of the board bearing down, Richard turned to Elaine. His voice was heavy, but firm. You're finished here. Effective immediately. Elaine's face twisted with disbelief, then fury, as security escorted her out. For years she had thrived on whispers and shadows, but in the end, the light had stripped her bare. And with that, my name was cleared. Yet I couldn't shake the question echoing inside me after betrayal this deep. Was there truly a place left for me in that company? The answer would come sooner than I expected. When Richard reached out himself, when Richard called me, I almost didn't answer. But something in me needed to hear the words. His voice was softer than I remembered, stripped of the authority that once carried every conversation. Anna, he began. I was wrong. I should have trusted you. I let myself be swayed, and it cost the company dearly. We need you back. For a long moment, I said nothing. The silence held all the humiliation, the betrayal, and the weight of years I had given. Then I replied, steady and calm, if I return, it will be under my terms. Full authority over the project, and no more family favoritism, not for Claire, not for anyone. There was hesitation, but then Richard exhaled, agreed. When I walked back into the office, it wasn't with bowed shoulders, but with quiet resolve. Claire was waiting near my desk, her eyes searching mine. Anna, she said, almost shyly, I want to keep learning from you. If you'll still let me. I studied her for a moment before nodding. She had stood silent when I needed her most, but she had also found the courage to admit the truth. That counted for something. Devon was officially promoted to lead developer, recognition long overdue. The team rallied again, this time stronger, steadier, under clear direction. The antivirus launched successfully, contracts signed, reputation restored. As for Elaine, her name vanished from the company directory overnight. The same whispers she once controlled now chased her out the door in disgrace. At the next board meeting, Richard announced new anti-nepotism policies, his voice carrying both humility and resolve. The room approved without dissent. It was a small step, but a necessary one. Looking around at the faces of my team, I felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. We had survived the storm. Claire was growing into her role. Devin had earned his place, and I had reclaimed my voice. But even as the company found stability, I knew deep down policies could change structure, not hearts, and favoritism, once rooted, was never erased so easily.